Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it's time for another It's the Bread story. I am so excited to hear from my guest today. Several months ago, I interviewed Sara Valentine and shared her story in episode 66 of Sue's Healthy Minutes. If you haven't listened to it yet, I encourage you to do so. Her story is an amazing one of hope and healing. Recently, I had the honor of being the guest speaker at a women's brunch at Calvary Chapel, Chattanooga. It was an amazing event with about 200 women in attendance. Throughout the day, I kept meeting women in the church who were connected to Sara Valentine in one way or another. I had no idea when I accepted the invitation to speak at Calvary Chapel, Chattanooga, that there was this connection. Either family or friends of Sara Valentine came up and spoke to me. One beautiful young lady who shared the green room with me prior to leading praise and worship for the event shared with me that she was Sara's sister-in-law, married to Sara's brother. If you heard Sara's story, it was Sara's brother. This brother that first introduced Sara and their family to Bread Beckers and Real Bread. He found us while searching for answers that might help his son. Well, it was a women's event, so I did not get to meet this brother. But first thing Monday morning after the event, I got this text message from Sara's brother. Miss Sue, I want to say a special thank you. My name is Tyler Golson. I work at Calvary Chapel, Chattanooga. My wife led worship for the event that we hosted for you. Her name is Golson. We have been coming to Bread Beckers over the past year, and it has completely changed our family and our lives, especially our soon-to-be 5 boys. My little sister, Sara Valentine, was actually on your podcast. Since we started milling, we experienced the amazing results, and we have been telling everyone we know, and the stories are endless. Your faithfulness to the Lord and endurance in this endeavor has been life-altering for an innumerable amount of people. In the last 24 hours, and I'll say since the event, my phone has been blowing up from people we dearly love that have already been able to eat bread for the first time in years. Thank you for sharing the truth. At some point, it would be an absolute honor to speak to you and get the chance to meet you. Well, first of all, his words encouraged me and blessed me more than you can ever imagine. And so today, I thought this would be the perfect chance for Tyler Golson to share his story with you all. So today, it's my great privilege to let you hear from Sara Valentine's big brother, Tyler Golson. Tyler, I just want to welcome you to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to share your It's the Bread story with us all. Before we get into all of that, would you tell everyone just a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from? I know your beautiful family.
Sure. It's an honor to be with you. And again, just can't thank you enough for the pioneering that you've done. I know that for not just our family, but for many families, they're beginning to experience and understand that there's not just the physical side to this and the physical benefit, but it's very much interconnected with the scripture.
Yes.
And I love how you continue to intertwine that. I grew up in a pretty amazing home. My parents were in ministry. My dad's still a pastor in the Southern Baptist Church, and had a little sister, a little brother, and an older brother. And we grew up in a Christian home, and were discipled by our parents in incredible ways, and we were homeschooled. So that was when homeschooling was still a little bit of an oddity. We were the weird family that did homeschooling instead of going to school. And so there's always been a little bit of a natural against the grain wired into me. The people that know me the best know that I'm pretty quick to challenge the status quo and ask questions and take things with a critical approach. So, but yeah, I graduated high school. I proposed to Bette, my wife, Thanksgiving Day of my senior year of high school, and we got married about 20 days after I graduated.
Oh my goodness!
And so we just celebrated 12 years of marriage this past June.
That is amazing.
So she's incredible and just an amazing mom. I'm glad you got the chance to meet her and vice versa.
Yes.
So now we've got 4 little boys. We've got Titus is not quite 6. He turns 6 this month. We've got a set of twin boys that are 4 years old. And then that's Amos and Caleb. And then we have Silas as our youngest. He's 2 years old. And then Mr. Luca will be here at the end of December. So
that is amazing how God has blessed y'all. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
there's
a testimony in itself. Just out of high school, y'all married, and you've made it work for 12 years. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's been a test. I tell people that somehow has put up with me for 12 years. But yeah, we would do the same exact thing 10,000 times over again. I mean, we have zero regrets whatsoever. Yeah. So yeah, I'm in full-time ministry. I have been since 2011, 2012. We serve at Calvary Chapel, which is just one of the most incredible places that we have ever come across.
I haven't stopped talking about it since I've come home. I've told my pastor. In fact, we're planning to come up and visit. Yeah.
Well, if you do, let us know. We've got a place y'all could stay. So
okay, all right, that sounds great.
We can take care of that.
Yeah. So full-time ministry there at Calvary Chapel.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So we've been in youth ministry for since right at the end of 2011, 2012. And we're involved in our family ministry here at Calvary Chapel. We have part of a staff team within our staff of 6 people. We oversee everyone from newborn to 12th grade in high school. And so there's about somewhere around 1,000 to 1,100 kids that we attempt to disciple, and leaders that join with us in that.
That's quite a ministry. That's quite an outreach right there.
There are very few dull moments in the Golson household. I will say that.
Imagine with your own kids and now ministering to so many children. That is quite a ministry. It really is. And I admire you so much. Now, how did you hear about Bread Beckers? What led you to finding out about us?
So my wife and I, when we were, I was 18 and Bette was 20, and one of our bucket list items at some point was to go to Italy. And this past summer, we were able to go and celebrate our 10th and 11th year anniversary in Italy with some really sweet family friends. And while we were there, I was a little bit annoyed the whole time. I mean, it was beautiful and we had a blast. We basically took on the whole western coast of Italy. And my wife and I both love. Our life revolves around food. We've always loved good food.
Yeah.
We think that Jesus spent a lot of time over good meals with good people, and we're eating unbelievable food. And I'm the frustrated part of me the whole time is I can't put my finger on it, but this is so dynamically different. There's such a significant disparity between the food that we eat in the States and the food that we were experiencing while we were in Italy. And that went for pretty much everything. I mean, from fruit and produce to the food you would eat at restaurants to the bread, everything was significantly different. And And I just couldn't figure it out. And so when we came home, part of me was just really angry with the food culture of the United States. I just like, man, I can't get over how significant of a difference that was.
Well, what do you mean by that? What did you experience?
So
the food itself?
Yeah. So primarily the production of food is quite different. The meal itself is something that's very family oriented. Everyone's involved. Restaurants are owned by families. There's grandkids in the kitchen, which was one piece. The other piece that was more food centric was the products themselves. So there weren't any. We didn't really come across any big box food stores or grocery stores. There were markets, and so in the markets, you would go and you would get fruit and cheese and bread, and everything was fresh within the last day or so.
Yes,
that was on the shelf. So you're directly farm to shelf. Producer to shelf. And I went one morning and just got some stuff. I walked down to a local market and just got some stuff for a charcuterie board for me and my wife and for breakfast, and got some fruit, some meats, some fresh bread, and some different things. And I remember, this is just an imprint in my mind, but I remember cutting open this pear, and I don't even like pears that much, to be honest with you. But I remember cutting open this pear, just baffled by the amount of juice that was coming out of the pear. And I was like, I almost feel bad, because I'm like, I'm losing all the good stuff. And I'm like, what's going on? And we sit down and we eat this fruit and some vegetables and some different things, some olives. And it was unreal. I mean, the word that kept coming to my mind was, this is real. This is real food. Like I'm eating in my mind, what I'm eating, they match.
Yes.
There's nothing artificial whatsoever.
Yes.
And there was a purity that my mind and the expectation of my mind, desired, and it was being met.
Yeah.
And so we get home, and I'm just like, man, I gotta figure out what's going on. Like, I've got to dig into this.
Yeah.
And so I started doing some research. One of our ministries at church is called Renew. It's an intensive discipleship ministry for recovering addicts. And we have a 180-acre farm where we grow beyond organic food. Everything's self-sustaining, and everything is just above board. There's no antibiotics. There's not even artificial fertilizer. I mean, it's all 100% sustainable farming. And I've always known that food tastes different, but really never felt a compulsion to cross the bridge per se. And so I was in the midst of my research, I came across a video or an article, I can't remember, but it was talking about some of the dynamic changes that took place in the food production world within the United States. And it was, I think, mid-'80s. There were two cigarette companies, major cigarette owners, that lost a pretty major lawsuit because of some sketchy practices, both with marketing and safety. Obviously, we know what the toll that cigarettes have taken on our society. But I think there were some major lawsuits that they lost, and I believe that Philip Morris was one of them. The other was, don't quote me on this, I think it was like R.J. Riley or something like that. Reynolds, yeah. I'm reading this article, and these two guys that were part of the cigarette industry, one of them, Reynolds, I believe, purchased Nabisco Foods, and then Morris purchased Kraft as well as General Foods. And basically what happened is there was a massive shift in the food industry when they purchased them, because we can safely assume that they began to use the same practices that they were using in the cigarette company, both with marketing and with production. They're trying to make things as cheap as possible and last on the shelf as long as possible, which you can't separate the usage of synthetic chemicals to make that happen. And so now we have largely big box grocery stores with things that can last for, months and months and months, if not years and years and years. And that led to digging into flour, and that led to digging into a whole host of different things, dairy, eggs, and all sorts of things. So I'm kind of stuck at this point because I have no solution. I just know it's bad.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this stuff's bad. It's like the end of the book of Judges. It's like everything's bad, but nobody really has an answer. So they did what was right in their own eyes. And happened to be meeting with a previous student who was in from college named Anderson White. And I was sharing with him just like, man, I'm looking at my kids and I'm looking at the overall broad brushing health of the United States and some of my own health. And I've just got big questions and no answers. And he leaned back in his chair, and he's such a smart kid to be, I think he's 21 years old. He leans back in his chair and he goes, "Have you heard of the Bread Beckers?" And I was like, the bread who? And he was like, "The Bread Beckers." And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it was actually his mom that had come across you guys, and I'm not sure how she did, but she's been milling flour for quite some time. And he's like, "You need to listen to this podcast. They're an hour and a half away. You just need to listen." And I was like, okay. So I listened to your very first podcast, It's the Bread. And I was sitting in my office, and it was like the Lord was like, "Here it is, my friend. Like, here's one of the pieces of the puzzle that I'm going to unlock for you." And so that's the only thing I listened to. I listened to that one podcast. I came home, I looked at Beth, and I was like, "Hey, we're off on Mondays and Tuesdays." I was like, "Tomorrow morning, we're going to Woodstock, Georgia."
Wow.
And she's like, "Okay, what are you talking about?" And she's like, and so I share with her, and she's lit up. She just can't believe it. She's like, "All right, I'm in." So we refinanced our house to go make a trip to Bread Beckers.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
No.
We were though. We were so convicted. I started looking at prices, and I'm like, okay, it's basically going to be $1,000 to set up shop, and to not have to continue. We're gonna throw everything we've got into. We're gonna go full stop. And so we go, and we love the store. There's this little outlet, and I'm like, man, I feel like these are my people. And we've always loved olive oil, and so we heard your bit on when you guys tested your olive oil, and I was just like, our food culture is so messed up. It's so sick and so pervasive that there's nothing it doesn't touch at this point.
Yeah.
And so we got the mill, we got a bread maker, we got a bunch of buckets of wheat, we got lecithin and all the things that we needed to start. And our son had previously dealt with chronic constipation, and like to the point at which he would be writhing in pain. We had to take him to the emergency room twice, actually.
Wow. Your oldest?
My oldest, Titus.
Yeah.
And then our twins, we just thought it was developmental, but one of our twins, his name is Amos, and he, as a very young infant, he experienced the same, where we were having to give him suppositories for a brief season there, almost weekly, and we actually had to take him to the ER as well. It got so bad. We were told by reputable, wonderful, Jesus-loving pediatricians that this is typical and it's normal, and sometimes there's a variance in when kids have bowel movement. Some kids go every day, some kids go once every 4 or 5 days, and that just didn't sit well with us. Oh. I'm just like, man, I don't have a ton, but I've got a minor in biology and spent some time in a cadaver lab, and it's just not supposed to work that way.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
And so we didn't really agree then, but we didn't have a solution. And so we come back, we start making bread, And within 3 days, all of our kids' gut health just night and day improved. I mean, like, it was like someone turned on a light switch.
Wow.
And so we started digging in on insoluble fiber and the impact and the enzymes that are being removed, the enrichment ingredients and chemicals that are added to our food that, in my opinion, really play a role in increasing cancer and the insulation of the cell and a high susceptibility to all types of diseases and cancers. And it's something that, I'm right there in the generation. I'm originally from South Mississippi, and we, growing up, we had an acre of corn and we had a 2-acre garden, and we still had a lot of food that we grew ourselves because there was a generation that was still connected to those practices. But now that's largely gone.
Yeah.
And so then I started digging into even the plummeting of testosterone levels within males, even contrasted to 50 years ago. I think there's about a 300-point disparity at this point for the same age groups as there were in 1973. So that was a lot. But we start doing this bread, and 3 days in, our son is regular. All of our sons are regular. Overall health. There's a bloatedness that disappeared that they previously had. We eliminated white sugar altogether and shifted to the honey granules. And for the first time since we were in Italy, I found myself going that the only word that I can match with this bread and everything else, because we're doing everything. I mean, cookies and we're doing it all, muffins, the whole bit. I was like, this tastes real. Yeah. This tastes like real food. I mean, this is what my intrinsic, thought process and expectation hopes for when I think about bread. Yeah. And so we all experienced just unbelievable benefits. And then it began to really shift the entirety of our household and how we operate, where we don't even have white sugar in our house anymore. We don't use it at all. Largely it's removed from our diet, completely. And then after a season of eating the bread, our taste buds and our desires even changed, where we don't even get bread when we go out to eat. Yes. We just do basic proteins and vegetables, because it's not only not desirable, but our bodies are sort of resistant to it. We don't have bad effects from it, but we don't want it. Yeah. That was actually gluten-free for quite a season because that was really ramping up. Yes. And but she didn't necessarily, even when she went gluten-free, there were things that wouldn't happen that benefited her, but she wasn't thriving. Like, her gut health wasn't thriving, and started digging into the high starchy materials of gluten-free foods. And what we found is that, again, this is opinion based, but gluten-free has become marketed and commercialized to the degree at which everything else has. Exactly. Exactly. And it, I read a study, medical study, that it really does change your gut health for the worse. 100%. It's terrible. Yeah, it tends to reduce your good organisms and increase the pathogenic. So that's a sad. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the highly processed, it's highly processed, primarily rices and potato materials that are processed. And then, it's obviously not cost efficient by any means. No. And it really isn't beneficial for overall health. And so anyway, so we're like, golly, I mean, we kind of shoved all the chips on the table, and it was worth it. And then I called my mom, who's been gluten-free for probably 10 years. Yeah. Sarah said she went gluten-free with her, just out of being a mom. Yeah. Which was a lot for my mom. God love her. I mean, that was a sacrifice that she really stepped into. But I called her and I called Sarah, and I was like, look, worst case scenario, you have a bad night. Best case scenario, you experience a transformation of everything you think about food.
Yeah.
And so I can't remember if we sent them a loaf or I can't remember what happened. They still live in Mississippi. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
I think Sarah said she was home for the weekend, or maybe you were visiting her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
your mom, and did y'all come to a cooking class, you and your mom, or you
My mom and my dad did. We were going to meet them, and it ended up not working out. They came to the chocolate Valentine's class.
That's right, the chocolate class.
Yeah.
It's a great class to start with. It's very different. But yeah, she said after that, and I think you were home, or were there too, and your mom had made bread, and she said they kept encouraging me to try it, and she goes, I stared at it, and finally she did. And
yeah, I just told her, I was like, take it like a vitamin supplement for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Take a small piece, eat it. Your gut's obviously not used to gluten, but this is not. It's not the same type of gluten as we have come to understand gluten.
Yeah.
And so I think she made it about 3 days eating a small piece. And after that, I think she was making like 4 dozen cookies a day or something like that.
Yeah.
Just going, it wasn't that bad, but she just went, she was like, I'm in. What was crazy about her is she had not had dairy in over a decade as well. And after eating the bread, she can actually now have dairy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, and then it's just been, we're pretty open people. Our lives are pretty open book. You can imagine even with ministry, it's just kind of wide open. And so we've got some sweet friends, in Chattanooga in particular. There's a lot more of the gluten-free culture even than there is in South Mississippi. And we just started having conversations with people. One family in particular was about to go all gluten-free to their daughter who was experiencing the same symptoms as Titus. We told them about it. They've been to Bread Beckers multiple times and spoken with David and met him. And and then we just, you're going to have this lady on. We just this week after the event, some friends that are on staff with us, she almost didn't make it. She had such a severe reaction to what she understood to be gluten. She was hospitalized and she almost didn't make it.
Yeah. From getting some bread out at a restaurant, I think. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. And so after you left, after the women's event, that gave her the loaf of bread and she took it home. She tried it, a small piece, and it was people were on call, like ready to rush her to the emergency room if it didn't go well. And she had zero negative effects. She's now already eating significant portions of bread again, and is completely fine.
Yeah, that's
so.
Ever since talking to Sarah, I lead a lot of people to Sarah's story, because that not only are they finding that they can they don't just tolerate this bread.
It improves.
Their health is renewed and restored.
100%.
I remember Sarah saying she tried it with fear and trembling, but she said, I went to bed that night. I didn't have stomach pain. I slept the best I've ever slept. I pooped the best I've pooped in months.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing people don't realize. Yes, going gluten-free may stop some of your abdominal pain, but it's not the gluten, it's the commercially processed bread that is just all you're left with is protein and starch, and then lots of chemicals and sugar, and which is constipating and difficult, doesn't do anything to heal your gut. Yeah, I'm amazed. I know the lady you're talking about, and she's already reached out to me, and she said, I'm going to give it a couple of weeks, and then I want to come on and share my story. So I can't wait to hear her story. It's going to be amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah. The other piece of the journey that's been pretty revolutionizing is I've been a student of God's word for a long time now. I've been teaching the word regularly for 12 years, 13 years now. And that's been the other piece, is actually doing critical word studies on bread. And it has been fascinating to look at the scripture through a different lens.
Yes.
Because as we understand it, I mean, for the scripture to be inerrant, and, breathed out, inspired by the Holy Spirit, there are not only a pretty outrageous number of references to bread, which could easily be cocked up to just be cultural references, but when you actually dig into them, they're significantly more than just a cultural reference when he speaks of bread. And even down to the threshing floor and the milling stones. And they were an agrarian society that ate fresh milled grain. And one of the passages that's been most illuminating to me is that we're teaching through the book of Genesis right now with our student ministry. And I believe it's in Genesis chapter 3 that God actually extends the judgment to Adam and Eve and to the serpent in response to the fall. And he shares with the serpent his judgment, and then to the woman, referencing the pain in childbirth she would experience. And then he gets to Adam, and it's fascinating, but I've got it right here. Yeah, he says to Adam, because you've heeded the voice of your wife, and you've eaten from the tree which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat of the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. And the interesting piece in the, obviously the context of that passage is God disseminating judgment on bad decisions for Adam and Eve, and as well as the serpent. But in the structure, as he's extending judgment, he's also extending solution. And so while he's extending judgment to the woman, hey, you're going to experience pain in childbirth, he also is communicating that she is indeed going to bear children. And so there's an interesting nuance to what seems to be exclusively a negative connotation, when really, of all the things that God could have said was going to sustain Adam, it's none other than bread. He didn't say you're going to plant vegetables, trees, and eat of the veg. He doesn't say that you're going to plant fruit trees and eat of the fruit. He doesn't say that. He says, by the sweat of your brow, you're going to raise up herbs, and you're going to eat bread, and that's going to be the thing that sustains your life. And so it's also pretty difficult, and maybe you could even speak into this. It's also pretty difficult when there's a really strong emphasis, even within the evangelical Christian communities, of being gluten-free, when if you look at the scripture in context, it really doesn't align. And obviously there are severe cases of celiac disease, and I'm not discrediting that. I mean, obviously there are people who...
It's very rare, though. And
it is.
It's less than 1% of Americans have true genetic celiac disease. What people are experiencing now is the result of the heavily processed bread that's in, and I hate even calling that bread.
I agree.
That's not what God created, and I love Isaiah 55 verses 1 and 2. I think it is. It says, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your earnings satisfy? To me, that is, I'm like, I didn't know it wasn't bread, I mean, and that was the missing piece of the puzzle for our family. We were eating real food except for our bread. And it was significant when we changed our bread, the health, how our family's health changed. But it's amazing, the scriptural references. And then another one that jumps out at me, which is not necessarily talking about bread, but Haggai 1, 5 and 6, that's the one says, consider your ways and how you've fared. You sow much, but you reap little. You eat, but no one is full. You drink, but no one is satisfied. That describes us today for sure. But then it's the last one. It says, and you earn wages. You toil to earn wages to put them in a bag with holes in it. And at one, I really looked at how much of the American dollar, is spent on groceries, and then how much is spent on medical. And I can't remember it now because it was years ago when I did that little pie chart and was like, this is where our money goes. But I'm like, we're spending a huge amount of money on food, well, on non-food, on what we call food, that is making us sick. It's not nourishing. It's making us sick. And then the rest of our money goes to medical bills,
No doubt.
And just like you, I wanted to make this point. You said you came down, you second mortgaged your house jokingly to come to Bread Beckers. And people heard that and they're probably like, click, I'm turning this off if I've got to spend. No, but you know what I'm saying. And you don't have to spend that much, but.
Not at all.
How much did those ER visits cost for your two sons?
Oh, it's not even close. Yeah. I mean, $3,000 a pop.
I mean, and so I'll never forget this one lady, came up, how much is the mill? And I told her, and she said, I've spent more than that, than one prescription drug that didn't work. What have I got to lose? And this was to treat warts. Her daughter had over 500 warts. And in 2.5 weeks, after 5 years of medically treating those warts that just continue to come back and now had spread all over that child's body, 500 warts. They tried medication, and the purchase of a grain mill and a couple of buckets of wheat, that child's warts were gone in 2.5 weeks. That's insane. That's pretty amazing. So that's what I tell people. I hear you, but what do you want to spend your money on? Do you want to put it in a bag with holes in it? Or do you want to come back to God's way of eating and living and just glorifying Him and being in health? And that's, and that is sad that, I tell people too, this is the first time that I can remember studying nutrition and more alternative ways to eating and medicine that I have ever seen both allopathic medicine and more natural medicine both jump on the anti-grain gluten-free diet. Them agree.
So it's been a really interesting evolution over the past 30 years, because it didn't start with the gluten-free thing. That's caught on and spread like wildfire. And it was primarily, and it continues to be primarily supported by anecdotal, self-diagnosed individuals who are trying to see, treat symptoms as opposed to the root cause of the issue. And one of the things that even blew my mind, the very same companies that are mass producing food, they have to fall in lines within the government laws of the country that they sell in. And so if you were to pick up a bag of Lay's in the United States and pick up a bag of Lay's in the UK or Italy, you're getting a bag of chips. But if you look at the ingredients,
very different.
They're different.
Yeah.
And so I think if we've learned anything, particularly over the last 3 years, not to be controversial, but I think it would be safe to say that not all of the, governing agencies as well as the FDA has our best interests at heart, because money is a very motivating factor. Yeah. And as a business person, if you can package something for a nickel or a dime and sell it for $4, you're probably going to do that regardless of the health of your customer, because that sort of is irrelevant, especially when it's been normalized. Yeah. And as a precursor even to the gluten-free movement, you had loads and loads of diet fads connected to multi-level marketing that begin to get introduced that were primarily what? Yeah. I mean, they were primarily carb-free. Yeah. And there was an attack on all forms of carbohydrates, particularly bread, as being the evil that makes you fat. Yeah. And even that is not even close to the truth.
I know. When we started, we've been in business now 31 years, which is amazing that God has brought us far. We started in our tiny little home that we still live in. But, when we started, it was more revealing the truth of what was done to the flour, and saying, this is why you need to do this to make your bread. But it has morphed over the years. Now it's why bread is not evil. It's not the evil. Yeah. Why grains aren't evil. Jesus compared himself to bread. And grains, are the mainstay of most diets around the world. And people don't realize, and to say it's carbohydrates that are making us fat. It's carbohydrates that are making us sick. Well, it's not that way around the rest of the world. And,
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, when you contrast just obesity rates from us to a country that lives primarily off of bread, like Italy or France, where the disparity is staggering.
Yes, it is. And the thing, I think that one of the things that troubles me so much is conventional medicine, allopathic medicine, and even healthy, minded alternative type health professionals. They are not differentiating between the junk that's in the store that is made and real wheat. They're calling that, that's not wheat. And up with a great analogy. You might laugh at this. I was sitting here one day and I'm like, how do I get people to understand that is not wheat? Because they'll say wheat makes you fat and wheat does this and wheat does that and wheat does this. And I'm like, just because that was made from wheat, that is not what wheat is. And so I was sitting here one day and I was writing on the paper and I'm like, paper, it's made from wood. It's made from trees. But we never say that this paper is a tree. You know, why are we doing that with the most nutrient-dense food God has given us? We're demonizing it because of the stuff that's out there, calling it wheat.
Just briefly, you mentioned something that made me think that it is fascinating that, the one substance that God directly told man that would sustain him would be bread. It was at the fall, and it would be bread that would sustain humans in the physical sense, ultimately, until Christ, which refers to himself as the bread of life, would come and fulfill the old covenant. And to think that it's a coincidence that he refers to himself as the bread of life, matched with the passage that man must not live by bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God. There's this insinuation that, we should just live by the word of God, which is obvious, that the soul is brought to life and fulfilled and satisfied by the bread of life. But to reverse engineer that, the statement that Christ made to Satan in the wilderness is that there's an insinuation in which man could potentially live on bread alone if he chose to in the physical sense. But I love the beauty, though. The start, both in the start of Genesis, there is a reference to bread being the sustenance for humanity, and then the fulfillment of that covenant is the bread of life. I just don't think that you can call that a coincidence.
Well, no, and I just had a thought. It's the revelation of being born again. The physical is the physical bread, the spiritual is the real bread of life, Jesus Christ, and that's what sustains us. And I'm like you, I've always thought about that scripture when it says man does not live by bread alone. That's not a negative comment about bread. It's saying just because you have bread, you think you can, it's physical life, but I'm telling you, there's something more than physical. There's your spiritual life as well. So, wow, it is amazing. We could go on. I think we're very like-minded. And, I wanted to go back and your whole experience in Italy, the way people eat and the way they buy food. We saw that same thing in Israel. We saw it in even way back in Latvia when we adopted our sons. The way, even when you eat out, we thought, wow, the service is so bad. Our waitress never came back and checked on us. And we said something to, the local person that was taking us to dinner. And they said, no, they don't come and interrupt your meal. They're assuming you're fellowshipping and you're enjoying the conversation around the table. And our whole concept, even in that, even when we eat out, is get my food fast, get it here, get it cleaned away, in and out,
Yeah.
And it's just so different. And yes, go into the market in Tanzania, in Haiti, where we built bakeries. It is, you just go there and the food is fresh. The kids, mangoes that they picked off the mango tree. And, you go and you get the bananas. And I'm telling you, you've never eaten a banana unless you eat one in Tanzania or Haiti where it's come right off the tree, has it?
Yeah, we spent time in the Dominican Republic. Yeah. And the pineapple, the mango, the banana, it's like candy. I mean, it's what real sugar is intended to be.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying, and that's something that I know even our family, you get caught up in the American busyness and fastness and instant everything. And it has really robbed us of our mealtime and our fellowship. Some of our best memories of our kids being home was sitting around our big dining room table and just talking and eating and laughing and fellowshipping, and it's just not there. And I know we went to Israel last year and celebrated Shabbat, on Friday night, and you sit around the table and you have bread, and then the fathers get their families around them and pray a blessing over them. I think our culture, our families, our children would be a whole lot different if we did that. I hear what you're saying, and it revolves though around food, and God meant it to be that way.
Totally.
So, yeah, I'm just so excited. So I am just, oh man. So I do want to ask you a couple more questions. So you said that you started sharing everything, what you were doing with other people. What was their reaction? Were they scared? Were they skeptical? Did they think you were crazy or what,
So, I mean, my mentor, his name is Kenny. He's one of the greatest gifts just that the Lord has given us. He's incredible. He's walks with us consistently. He was probably the one that made fun of me the most.
Yeah.
Which is good. Like, it wasn't like bad. He's just, we're just unbelievable friends, and he's a brother, and so he has the latitude to go there. And so he actually calls it the magic bread. That's what he calls it. And so we had a lot of dialogue. His wife was actually at the women's event, and she's like, "Okay, well, I'm in."
Yeah.
And so, but the majority, and he wasn't critical.
Oh yeah.
I'm very easy to make fun of. I'm an easy target, and it's hard. You got to really work to offend me. You got to say something about my wife or my kids for me to get riled up. But our experience was largely very well received. I mean, in Chattanooga in particular, we say we have a healthy population of crunchy people.
Yeah.
They're very granola. It's a pretty health conscious city.
Yeah.
That's extremely active, outdoorsy. And so there's a lot of these ideas that are already woven in, but much like ourselves, there was just a lot of ignorance attached to bread. And when I started digging into the biology of it, both on the physiological side for humans and as well for the structure of the plant itself, I was just like, man, this is irrefutable. I mean, this is not a fad. This is not a way to lose 30 pounds in 5 days. This is not an option. This is basic black and white, evident, logical science that has been established for hundreds and hundreds of years. That's completely irrefutable. And so that's kind of where when we would sit down with our friends, that would come over and we would have fresh bread out, we would be like, we got to tell you about this. You got to hear about this. And we would share. And largely it was received with, oh my gosh, how have I never thought of this or heard of this? Because it's not an overly complex idea. It's actually quite simple. Yeah. And for us, I think as a culture, we've been bait and switched so much. Yes. That we've become cynics to most things. And especially if you're wired like me, I'm just naturally critical of things.
Yep, me too.
And so because that has happened so much, I think we're resistant to most things. Yeah. But the weird piece is at the same time, we're consumeristic. And so we try kind of anything and everything. So there's a weird tension of like, I don't know about this, but at the same time, I'll try anything that'll work. How much is it going to cost me type situation. And so the majority of our friends, like I said, Becca and Marco, he's actually our worship leader. They jumped in immediately and started their daughter, immediate improvement, total gut transformation. And that was literally, we had that. It was just the Lord, because that was a conversation we had literally the week prior to their entire family going gluten-free. And which was a lot for them because he's French Canadian and he's an unbelievable chef. She's even before she started milling bread, she's a bread making fanatic. I mean, she actually did a class on bread making for one of our Surround Summer events where people can sign up, and it filled up instantly. And she's milling grain and making bread, and the response has been wonderful. I mean, it's not like I said, it's not rocket science. And once someone experiences it, it's like this isn't even a debate. It's not even a debate.
And that, that's the way it was for me. And it was so simple when I read that first medical journal that had the history of white flour in there. I was like, why didn't I think of this sooner? As a science major, as a food science major, I'm like, what? Why didn't I make this connection sooner? And the two things for me, it is scientifically sound and it's biblically sound.
100%.
And my message hasn't changed. My first recording, the CD that I pass out for free, even though CDs are obsolete now, which is why I started my podcast. But we started with a little cassette tape. That'll tell you how far back it goes. And then more CD, and now the podcast. It's the same message. It's the same message. It was recorded in 1993, the first year we were in business. And
I was one.
Yeah. Hey, no. It was the same year, though. I mean, it's the same information. And, and that's what and that didn't click with me until I was speaking probably 5 or 6 years ago. And the lady introduced me and she made that point. She said, I've known Sue for years now, heard her message. It's the same message. She shares this testimony or that testimony or new testimonies, but it's the same message. And she said, Jesus, the real bread of life, he said, I'm the same yesterday and today and forever. I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. The women's brunch was an amazing experience for me. It was just an honor to speak the truth and share with so many women there. And I have a feeling I'm going to have It's the Bread testimonies to share on my podcast for quite a while to come.
Oh, I think you're going to be lined up.
Yes.
I think you're going to be set.
Yeah. So I'm just so excited. And I got a chance to meet Becca. And so she's going to come on. And the lady you mentioned earlier, I'm already communicating with her. And I'm just so excited. And so I want to thank you again for sharing with me today and sharing with all the listeners your story. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we close out our time together?
I would just say, just do it. It really is that transformational. And I would just say that we have been lied to at every turn from the food industry. And it's got to be, it's always been the people of God that do things differently. You see that with the Israelites. And I really think that if there would be just an increasing number of people that just grasp the truth of really being liberated from processed food culture, starting with something as simple as bread. My exhortation would be, I think that the impact from that could be so much more multifaceted than people just experiencing better gut health. I mean, it touches so many areas of life. And I would just say, just pull the trigger and see what happens.
Do it. Yeah. That reminds me of something I thought of. Good health is not just about not being sick or not having a pain. It is about having the energy to do what God has called you to do. Isn't it sad when someone says, well, I can't walk anymore, I can't do this? I'm like, wow, that is so sad to me. But to be able to do all that God called you to do. I say to people, I want to live like Moses. I want to be 120 years old and be able to walk up the mountain and God just take me home. I want to be able to do all that he's called me to do and have the energy to do it, the strength to do it, not medical dependent, and just be able to do it until he calls me home and says, you finished the race. Well done, my faithful servant. That's who I want to be. And that's the message that I want to share. And that's what your testimony is. People can't argue with your testimony. They may say, oh, blah, 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 bread, people can't believe that something so simple could bring such renewed health and wholeness and well-being to their bodies. And God wants us to be a testimony. So
no doubt.
I just want to thank you for sharing your story, your testimony. You can't argue with it. I know.
Well, we're so grateful. We're grateful for you. We're grateful. We mean that. There's always someone that makes some movement in culture and in society and in the kingdom. But very rarely do you see people stick it out for the long haul. And I think it's just a gift that you didn't just start something for your own family 30 years ago, but you've persevered and you've endured and you've remained consistent for the last 30 years. And if there's anything our society is void of, it's really consistent, faithful, generations that remain and endure. And it's just, you're a gift, and you really have no idea how grateful we are.
Well, Tyler, again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us and all of our listeners. And I know God is using Sara's story and now yours to help so many find renewed health through real bread and to break the bondage of fear, I think, in so many ways. And I just thank you. What a blessing your testimony is to so many and your family. God bless you and your children. And when is Bet due with your son?
December 29th.
Oh, yay. All right.
Yeah, so it'll be a fun Christmas.
It will be. It will be. So thank you. Thank you to all my listeners today. Thank you for listening. And until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.